Let's get ready to rumble! Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes
Frazier! It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AtomCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. It is episode 174 of The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com and USCombatSports.com. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez. What's up, man?
What's going on, man? Just an interesting week when the biggest news in the combat sports world is that Jake the Snake Roberts randomly showed up at Raw.
That's right, man. And, I'm the wrestling fan here. It was good to see him there. He's been angling for a couple of years to get a shot at the Royal Rumble since he's cleaned his life up. He's been living with Diamond Dallas Page of WCW fame for the last couple of years. And he's pretty much stayed on the straight and narrow, so he's looking to make one more comeback.
At like 68 years old?
Yeah, at least, in the Rumble as a surprise entrant, it can be kind of entertaining. I mean, in terms of him coming back like forever, I doubt it. I mean, on the indie scene, even Terry Funk, he's 95 years old and he's still wrestling. So Jesus
Christ. Well, God bless him.
Yeah, well, at least we won't have that problem in MMA. Everybody wants that Legends division. Thank goodness we're not going to see, a 80-year-old Mark Coleman versus, a 75-year-old Randy Couture. That would be pretty, I don't know. It'd be maybe entertaining for all the wrong reasons, but nevertheless, I'm glad it's not happening now.
Who's your favorite? One question, and right away. Yeah, who's your favorite wrestler of all time?
My favorite wrestler of all time? I gotta go with Eddie Guerrero because I've always been into technical wrestling. I remember when he passed away. It was a very sad day, man. It was terrible. I've watched all his stuff, all his matches. I've always been a pretty huge fan of his. Everybody's gonna pick, their Stone Cold, Rocks, Hogan's, but Eddie Guerrero easily the most entertaining. Just his life cut too short.
That's amazing. To me, dude, I'm a big Bret the Hitman Hart fan. You might not believe that, but that's my guy.
Yeah, good pick. Yeah, Bret, very technical wrestler. No, returning this to a wrestling podcast. We're losing all our listeners right now who hate professional wrestling, but nevertheless, we are going to talk about that later on. So cover your ears again if you don't like pro wrestling. But nevertheless, Bret Hart, a legend. His match is very technical, and his career cut short, too. I don't know if you knew this, but his career cut short because he took a kick from Bill Goldberg legit in a match. That pretty much ruined his career.
Wow, I had no idea that was the reason why he stopped.
Yeah, he took a kick from Goldberg, and then he pretty much stopped wrestling, and then he was doing some plays in Canada, and he was riding his bike one day, fell off his bike, and suffered a stroke. And he really hasn't been the same since, so...
That's some crazy insight that you have there, Jay.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the holy trinity of combat sports, boxing, MMA, and pro wrestling. That's all three of them with me. Today, we're going to discuss, UFC Fight Night featuring Luke Rockhold taking on Constantinos Philippou. We're going to pretty much break down the story that's been taking a hold of really the world of just regular news of an MMA fighter from Las Cruces spinning off a home invasion, so we'll discuss that. We'll also discuss the UFC Fight Pass. We talked about that last week, but this week the WWE Network, the announcement was made at CES, and a lot of MMA fans that pretty much hate pro wrestling pretty much bash the UFC and praise WWE. So we'll discuss that, and we'll pretty much discuss a little bit about this maybe feud brewing between the World Series of Fighting and Bellator. But first, if you want to get in touch with the show, we're always available on Twitter through @TheLowBlow, also through email to lowblow505@gmail.com. Also, you can follow the Fight Fans Radio Network on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Ustream, and on Spreaker. And our podcasts are always available on the Stitcher Radio app, Spreaker, and on iTunes. So let's get into it. The standing 8 count, the top, 8 stories. I'm not sure if we made it all the way to 8 since it's kind of a slow news week, but pretty close to that. The top news stories of combat sports. And we start with a very serious and a story that, again, as I said earlier, that's really spread internationally in terms of a news story of an MMA fighter fending off a home invasion. Jorge, you have the details of this really dramatic story.
Yeah, Joseph Torres, an MMA fighter out of Las Cruces, New Mexico. He's a 27-year-old. He survived a home invasion attack by 4 alleged gang members And the attack actually left one of the men dead and another one hospitalized. So just really unbelievable scene that I can only imagine took place between Joe Torres and these invaders. Joe Torres was accompanied by a child. He had his girlfriend there, as well as the girlfriend's I believe sister as well in the home when these guys tried to break in. Torres defended himself and his family. He ended up killing one of the guys. Reports say that there was, quote, a shank that was brought into it. There were other reports that say it was just a random sharp metal object. Nonetheless, if it can stab somebody, it's a shank. So what we've seen just the last few days in news coming out of El Paso and the support for Joe Torres, just because of the fact he ended up being arrested. A lot of reports and allegations say that as one of the actual attackers was leaving his home, he actually kicked the guy, and that's part of the reason why he's actually arrested. A lot of the people feel that he's being targeted because he's a mixed martial arts fighter, but nonetheless, this is just a crazy story that's actually happening. There's been support a Joe Torres Facebook page set up by his attorneys, and he's received a lot of support. I mean, you've seen guys like Austin Trout, who's from Las Cruces, come out. The Jackson's MMA gym here in Albuquerque. There's reports that the fund to help support him and his legal fees, you've had people from as far as Denmark actually make donations, man. So it's just a crazy story that's taking over, especially here in the state of New Mexico, and not to mention just the general public's thoughts and feelings on what you're able to do when you defend your own home. And obviously you have, 90% of the stories I've seen are all, in favor of Joe Torres doing what he did to defend his family.
I want to ask you, Jorge, let's say if Joe Torres was, a basketball player, right? Like, he's not representing the sport of basketball. I mean, if he's playing for some, this is a hypothetical. If he's playing for some basketball league, near Mexico or in Texas, he wouldn't place any classification of what he does for a living here. He's 1-5 as a pro. Is his background as an MMA fighter being kind of the main reason why he might be charged with possible, charges from the, DA of Las Cruces? I mean, he's 1-5 as a pro. I mean, do you have any idea really if this guy was really into MMA 100%? Or if this guy just kind of did MMA as a hobby? You've seen the fighters that, they take fights, on the weekends. They have other jobs. I mean, I never heard of this guy prior to the story. In terms of Torres' kind of, dedication to the sport, because he's being pretty much represented as an MMA fighter. So I'm just wondering, was this all he knew? Was this kind of his occupation?
He did have a day job. He wasn't a mixed martial artist 100% of the time. I'm actually friends with Joe on Facebook, and he posts a lot of. He actually submits a lot of posts where he's going off to train. He actually fought at the Roctagon event in El Paso, July 26th. In 2012, he had a couple of fights. He was actually scheduled to fight next weekend at the Roctagon MMA event in El Paso, Texas. So,
oh wow, okay.
He was an active fighter. He fought, as I mentioned, June of 2012. He fought. July of this past year, he fought. So, I mean, he was starting off the year early with the fight the first month. So he was an active fighter. I mean, is he being targeted because of MMA? I mean, it might be a combination of things. It might be MMA, and we've seen pictures of him. This guy's sleeved up. He's tatted up. A lot of people would view someone like that and think he's a thug, even though they don't know him at all. So it's a strange story where you're seeing someone that looks like a stereotype defend himself in a way that most people could defend. So that's why it's such an interesting story, I think. And as far as I know, my just vague knowledge of the New Mexico law, as far as I know, if a person doesn't have to be provoked, if they feel that they're threatened in one manner and, they're at their home, they have the right to defend themselves, even if they're not being provoked. So the main issue here is people think that he's being arrested for defending his family, when in cases like someone walking away, or let's say someone technically, if someone says, all right, I'll stop or whatever, and you have them pinned down, and then you kill them, I mean, you might be arrested for, or charged at the very least for manslaughter. It's just crazy, the interpretation of laws that every single state in this union has.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. And I think, maybe his occupation as an MMA fighter could work for him. I believe you mentioned he had kind of a sketchy past before really getting into MMA. Maybe mixed martial arts really turned his life around. You could kind of change the story. I mean, we really don't know the intricate details of what's going on here, but it's all kind of speculation until we get something really nailed down here. But I mean, it just seems like this is kind of a 1-on-4 situation. Hopefully, this gets resolved fairly soon. With Joe Torres being an MMA fighter, and you said he has a fight next week, that's a source of income for him. So if he's unable to fight at that event, he's not providing for his family, even though he does have a day job. So hopefully,
I don't see how he could fight. I mean, I haven't.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
That's something I've tried confirming with the Rockagon promotion, but I don't see how he can fight with all of these distractions going on, or how he could even train. I'm sure there's people, whether it's friends or media, blowing him up 24/7, trying to get an interview, trying to get a scoop, trying to see if he's doing okay, if they're a real family member or friend. So it's just unbelievable. I think, would this story have gone internationally if it was just a regular person, let's say, defending themselves? I doubt it, because it's MMA. It's still taboo. It's a hot sport right now. It's a combination for something to go internationally as it has. And I mean, it's still unbelievable for one person, MMA fighter or not, to defend yourself against 4 others who are coming to possibly kill you. I mean, that's quite a feat in itself. But
it is. Yeah, it's incredible.
I think there's something we can all agree on, and we'll wrap this up. But you have every right to defend yourself if you feel that you or your family is threatened in your own home, I think.
Agreed. And I'm sure we'll get more details as the weeks go on. That's usually the case is with these type of news stories here. We kind of flip-flopped our reading of stories. Do you want to read this story, Jorge, or should I take it?
Sure. No. I mean, it's a big event that's actually going on. It's right around my cup of tea. But the Pacquiao versus Bradley rematch will likely happen April 12, 2014. So, after Bob Arum, of course, calling out Mayweather, knowing the fight isn't going to happen. They're thinking that the rematch of the 2012 controversial fight, possibly one of the worst decisions of all time, will happen in April. Pacquiao's, we're used to seeing him fight here in the spring. Pacquiao reportedly chose to face Tim Bradley in this rematch rather than, the fresh or his, sparring partner occasionally, and one of the hottest names in 2013, WBO junior welterweight champion Ruslan Provodnikov. I think Provodnikov would have been the much more exciting fight. This Timothy Bradley one. Bradley has earned a lot of people's respect. So Bradley's now 31-0, only 12 knockouts, but his last 2 fights, meaning the war he had with Provodnikov, and then just the outclassing of a future Hall of Famer and Juan Manuel Marquez. I think it draws a little more interest, at least, meaning from the end of their last bout. But I think Provodnikov would have been the match that a lot of people would have loved to see.
Do you see Bradley taking on more of like a reckless style, knowing, I mean, he said it himself against Provodnikov that he's going to be more reckless and lay it on the line. Do you see him doing the same thing against Pacquiao, considering, the first time they fought? I mean, he's pretty much, as we talked about, I was at that fight, and just the repercussions from that, it seemed like Bradley got destroyed by Pacquiao. It was pretty, I've never seen a guy who's won a fight fall from grace like that ever. And it seemed like Bradley totally changed his style. Do you see him just being more reckless against Pacquiao? Maybe we do see a barn burner come April.
I certainly hope so, because that's the only way he's going to gain respect from the mainstream casual boxing fans, because they have a bad taste of their mouth. When they hear Timothy Bradley, they go, oh yeah, he's like, that's the guy that, that was awarded, was, given and gift wrapped a decision against Manny Pacquiao. So to save face, he has to come out. And I think if he does do that, I mean, I think in a way he's in a lose-lose situation, kind of, because no one expects him to win this rematch against Pacquiao. And, if he's not going to get the easy gift that he did last time, man. there's no way in hell that they'll rob Manny Pacquiao back-to-back fights against Timothy Bradley. So if he's able to go all out and make it an entertaining fight at least, he'll gain the respect from the casual fans. The hardcore fans, he's already gained the respect because of what he's done in the last 2 fights.
Yeah, this bizarre. I just remember that fight like it was yesterday, and just seeing everybody in shock when they read Timothy Bradley as the winner. It was just unbelievable. A moment that I'll never forget. Speaking of pro wrestling, again, looks like the Brock Lesnar rumors won't die. In terms of him going to the UFC, a reporter from the LA Times claimed he heard Dana White claim that he was talking to Brock Lesnar during the UFC 168 event. Now, there's rumors that Brock Lesnar was there. There's been rumors that Lesnar was just backstage during the event. Other people have said that rumor just floated around to drum up hype for Brock Lesnar returning to WWE. So, I mean, right now, if you follow wrestling at all, he's involved in an angle, a storyline with Paul White, the Big Show, and he's going to have a match at the Royal Rumble. So, anything happening coming up within the next 2 months, I don't see likely, as he's pretty much booked till WrestleMania. Brock Lesnar is. So, I guess maybe after, WWE's biggest show of the year, maybe Brock Lesnar could be available. But as of now, if you want Brock Lesnar back in the octagon, you'll have to wait at least minimum till the summertime.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you want Brock back in the UFC?
It's interesting, man, because the heavyweight division is a division in which you can't really write anybody off. Like I was saying that, Alistair Overeem versus Frank Mir was a loser leaves town match. But then you see Cain Velasquez get hurt. You see Bigfoot Silva test positive, or I guess test positive for elevated TRT levels. Mark Hunt's hurt. And all of a sudden, those two guys, if they get 2 wins, they might be the number 1 contender, along with Travis Brown. With Brock Lesnar, if he trains, he gets 2 wins, he's back in the title hunt. So I think in terms of 1 to 10, I'd be intrigued. It's certainly an 8. But in terms of his health, I mean, it's really MMA that really damaged his health if you think about it. I mean, his pro wrestling career, he never had any problems with his stomach. And now it's him, he's been reported as taking steroids when he was in WWE. That's been confirmed. He never had any stomach problems or anything bothering him. And now it's him wrestling over 300 days a year. And with MMA, he's fighting, 2 times a year, maybe? And he had all these stomach problems. So it just seems weird to me why he would go back to mixed martial arts, considering that it was the source in the beginning of all of his health problems.
I'll give you a random stat that you might or might not be aware of. Out of the top 5 pay-per-views, grossing, meaning buy rate for the UFC, Mr. Lesnar owns 3 of the top 5.
I'm not surprised. I mean, he brings in that yeah.
I think they want him back bad, at least for the meantime. Because if they can have Rousey and maybe him, I don't know what, in the summer selling pay-per-views and holding it down while GSP's out, and while Silva's getting healthy, it's something that they need as far as buy rates when it comes to pay-per-views, I think.
They do because they're desperate, because it's not only their main stars that are out, but it's also their future stars that are injured. Guys like Anthony Pettis, who you might want to promote as the next star. Guys maybe like Jose Aldo, he's inconsistently hurt. Even Dominic Cruz, who got stripped of the belt. I mean, a lot of guys are out, a lot of guys are injured, and even with John Jones and Cain Velasquez, those guys are hurt, and those guys' pay-per-views didn't really do well the last time they fought, so they're kind of in a desperate situation here.
Random fact, John Jones is number 19th. That's the highest that he's at on the buy rate of all time for the UFC.
That's surprising, because I think everybody, including myself, thought he had a lot more potential to be a pay-per-view draw, and you really haven't seen that come to fruition yet.
No, not at all. So, I mean, just a little disappointing. But I think if Jones keeps winning and winning these tough fights, man, he's going to become a legend in this game.
Sure.
Yeah. Back to boxing, and where we talked about the heavyweights just now in the UFC. Talk about other heavyweights talking smack across the pond. Tyson Fury, who's a heavyweight out of England, 21-0 with 15 KOs. Is telling United States Deontay Wilder to grow a pair of balls. So Tyson Fury is pretty upset, and he's shouting at the top of his lungs. This guy likes to talk smack on Twitter. I think he's trying to make a name known for himself, trying to get up there on the make some noise in Europe, where the Klitschko's are, of course, king. And a top American prospect, Deontay Wilder. A lot of us are holding our breath for this guy, hoping that he becomes the next great American heavyweight champion and resurrects that division. Is 30-0 with 30 knockouts, for people who don't know who Deontay Wilder is. So for this fight to happen, it's going to be tough, just because of the fact, you have Tyson Fury, who I think has a mandatory. He's looking to actually, in the meantime, while he's waiting for Deontay, I don't think he'll get that fight anytime soon. He's waiting for Derek Chisora, who people might remember is the one who got glassed by David Hayes' Cam. He glossed me, the famous quote there. So that's going to go down in June, probably in England. So we'll have to wait at least 9-10 months if Deontay and Fury will actually fight. But either way, these guys got to step it up as far as competition. I mean, 30 fights down, Deontay, I don't think has fought anyone in the top 5 yet. So we definitely need these guys to start making some noise.
You've been on the Wilder hype train for a while. I want to ask you, since the Klitschko's are pretty much fading into retirement now. Who really? We've bashed heavyweight boxing when Will McClary was on the show. He hated the heavyweight division, the passion. With the Klitschko's pretty much gone within the next couple of years, who do you really seeing? Who do you see as like the next kingpins of this division at all? Is it possible? You've seen a lot of guys with colorful personalities like Tyson Fury. Do you see either of them, making their way up to the top, considering it doesn't take much to be the heavyweight champion?
I think we're looking at both guys. It's going to be these two guys. There's another Cuban heavyweight. People might not really know about him, but he's 20-1, only losses to Vitaly Klitschko. Odaliner Solis, Cuban fighter out of Havana, now fighting out of Cuba. Now fighting out of Miami. He's going to fight Tony Thompson. Tony Thompson is an old school guy, man. This dude is 42 years old, but he pulled 2 surprise victories out of a UK prospect, David Price. So it'll be those 3 guys. If I had to put money on the 2, it'll be the 2 guys we're talking about, Fury and Deontay. So if that fight could happen, that might be the next, semi-attractive fight in the heavyweight division, man.
Sure. At least the trash talk will be very entertaining.
It would. Sure.
One more note before we move on to 2 rounds. UFC 168 the pay-per-view numbers have come out. And really, it's a mystery how Dave Meltzer does this, because the UFC claims that they do not release their pay-per-view numbers, but somehow Dave Meltzer finds these numbers mysteriously and everybody accepts it. I do, because I respect Dave Meltzer and I think he's one of the best journalists in combat sports. So I'm going to take him at his word here. It seems like the show is going to look like it's going to be able to do up to 1 million to 1.1 million buys for UFC 168. So that is a great number for them, a huge success. We saw ESPN cover the show. Of course, Fox Sports 1. Tons of hype around Ronda Rousey. It's going to be interesting considering she's fighting so soon after this success. Now Ronda's the main event. She's the headliner. She's going to be the main draw. It's going to be interesting to see how this pay-per-view does as the main event.
That's very
coming
interesting.
Up in February.
And one more piece of news. This is locally. Fidel Maldonado Jr., there are reports, and also Leja Batá Promotions confirmed that he's actually going to be fighting Steve Forbes February 10th when he headlines. Steve Forbes, old school guy. He's fought dudes like Andre Berto, Oscar De La Hoya. He was the runner-up in the second contender, Jay. You probably remember that.
I do, yep.
The guy is 35-12, but he's only been stopped once, and that was by Kareem Mayfield about a little less than 3 years ago. So if Fidel can stop Steve Forbes, that's a good sign. But again, Steve Forbes, 36 years old, light welterweight. They're going to fight at Fox Sports 1 main event February 10th. Again, Monday night fights there in San Antonio, Texas.
You brought up the contender, Jorge. We have some time here. I want to ask you, it seems like, with The Ultimate Fighter, with MMA fans, they seem to respect the first, 4 seasons or so of the fighters that came through that show, Jardine, Griffin, so on. All of them get their props. But in boxing, with the contender, usually when, they'll go with, so-and-so is a contender veteran, they kind of say it snickering or in kind of a condescending fashion. Why is there so much venom for the contender, considering that show pretty much has provided a lot of opportunities for boxers that wouldn't have any without that reality show and really promoted the sport of boxing. Why is there such venom for that show even now?
You know, it's hard to understand. I think maybe because of the people who were behind it. I mean, you had Sugar Ray Leonard and Sylvester Stallone. It was just an odd match of people that were involved in this, and it was just put together at a time. Because think about it, Jay, when the Contender came out, it was just when boxing was kind of in limbo. You know, it was about 8-9 years ago. It originally aired in NBC in 2005.
Wow,
I mean, I mean, who? That's almost 10 years ago. Who?
Yeah.
You know, of all the sports, that's when MMA was on fire and Catching Storm, and you know, there was a lot of, you know, there was just outside of when the Lakers won all those titles. So all this attention was not on boxing, and boxing didn't really have a, you know, that huge star. Oscar De La Hoya was on his way out. You know, people still weren't, you know, leaning toward Mayweather just yet. So it was at a time when boxing was just seen as a sport that was dead, I think. So it started coming out of that. NBC had it in 2005. ESPN had it from 2006 to 2008. And then Versus had it in 2008. So
they did, yep.
I think the production in the first one, because it was NBC, it had NBC money behind it. And, you know, the production slightly dropped when it did go over to ESPN. So I think that's what turned a lot of people off. I knew a lot of casual fans, Jay, and some of you people that didn't even like boxing but were turned on by reality TV. And that was around the time that I feel, you know, the reality TV bubble was actually, you know, actually still growing. I mean, now people look at reality TV like as a joke, you know, and then people were addicted to it. And, you know, most people did watch reality TV around that time. So I think that's why, you know, looking in retrospect is, oh, that was a silly reality TV show series. Because you think reality TV now, what do you think? You think the Kardashians, man.
Yeah. And people still watch, you know, Duck Dynasty, and even like a show, again, pro wrestling reference, Total Divas. People that hate pro wrestling, they watch Total Divas. It gets high ratings. So, reality shows still matter even in 2014. Let's get
one more thing
sure.
about that I was going to say. I guess this could be my 2 rounds. As far as the UFC has, as far as tough, you have a lot more drama and a lot more immature guys in these. A lot of these guys don't have, you know, families. Some of these guys are fresh out of college or just extremely immature. Think about the guys that were on the Contender, man. These guys were grinding people that were probably, you know, feeding their family off of welfare, and they were actually true family men. So they were mature, and maybe it just didn't provide as much excitement, or I shouldn't say excitement, I guess, as immaturity being displayed as you see on Tough.
Yeah, that's a great point, because, you know, you can equate the Contender to the Ultimate Fighter, the comeback season, which those ratings did terrible. And that's kind of that pretty much that season of the Ultimate Fighter, the comeback played out the same way as the Contender. You know, a lot of older guys, a lot of mature guys, you know, Matt Serra, a lot of veterans, a lot of guys that, you know, they're over the party antics, the frat house antics. They just want to fight. They're looking for one more opportunity at the gold, and not looking to just, you know, party and get drunk every night.
And think about it. It's like people, I guess, our age and between the ages of like 19 and 25, let's say. They don't want to see someone that resembles their father on reality TV, and that's it. You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's what it had to do with the Contender as well.
Mm-hmm. I guess my 2-round segment, I saw an article on MMA fighting, and I don't know if you saw this, Jorge, about World Series of Fighting challenging Bellator to a kind of, I don't know, versus card. So it's kind of like an invasion card between World Series of Fighting and Bellator. It seems pretty desperate to me on World Series of Fighting's part. They seem to be kind of growing their own kind of, you know, niche. And really, to my surprise, they've done pretty well. Even though the ratings have kind of gone down a little bit, they've surpassed my expectations. I just don't see them challenging Bellator. I mean, as much as we sometimes criticize Bellator, I mean, right now, if this whole thing with AAA MMA comes anywhere to what AAA MMA thinks it's going to, I mean, if that comes to fruition, Bellator will have a minor league within regional MMA promotions. World Series of Fighting won't have that. Plus, Bellator will have, you know, at their weekly season series, they have at least known commodities enough, and a kind of a loyal fan base when they can get that night correct. So I think this is kind of desperate for Ray Seffel to do. I don't think the results truly matter here. Who wins, who loses. It just seems kind of you're trying to catch the coattails of another promotion that's kind of near you. I just think it's kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. But in a way, it's a publicity stunt. They fired shots first,
sure,
knowing that a shot will never be fired back at them. So
yeah.
In the media and in the long run, it just looks like Bellator refused and didn't stand up for themselves and by accepting the challenge. So if you think about it from a PR standpoint, it was a pretty good move on the World Series of Fighting because people are now talking about them and viewing Bellator in kind of a negative light, despite the fact Bellator has a lot more depth in their talent pool.
Sure. Let's move on to our main event topics. Really just brief topics here, but I want to get your thoughts on a couple of these stories that have really made their rounds the last couple of days, and we'll preview UFC Fight Night a little bit here. We talked about UFC Fight Pass last week. I saw the UFC Fight Pass event from Singapore. It's a pretty good event. Main event was pretty entertaining, even though I believe Jake Ellenberger was supposed to fight Tariq Saffiedine. Ellenberger got hurt, and Ellenberger got moved to another card. Saffiedine fought, I forgot the guy's name. I don't think I can pronounce it anyway, but an entertaining main event nevertheless. I watched it on the UFC.tv app, and I just want to make everybody aware that if you sign up for the UFC Fight Pass, and if you have the UFC app either on your phone or on your tablet, you can watch the Fight Pass events on your tablet or on your cell phone, even though it's not really the Fight Pass. So what I mean is the tablet, the app, had the Fight Pass event on there, and since I signed up for Fight Pass for free till March, I just pushed play and it worked. I just streamed it to my Apple TV, had no problem. So even though the interface on your computer might be for Adobe Flash and may not work on your tablet or cell phone, try the app UFC.tv and just watch it through there. You can watch classic fights through the app. You don't need to go to the UFC.com website to use Fight Pass on your mobile device if you sign up for it. So I just want to make everybody aware of that because I had no problems and I enjoyed it. Like the event came on at 6 o'clock in the morning. I just waited till nighttime to watch it and had no problems and enjoyed it. I thought pretty decent, entertaining night of fights. I mean, nobody who's going to be a title contender, but it's entertaining. It is what it is. So. In terms of that, the WWE Network debuted yesterday. Despite all the antics of the WWE, the press conference went pretty well. A lot of MMA fans are kind of bashing the UFC Fight Pass because the WWE Network is offering all 12 of their pay-per-views on this network for only $9.99 a month with a 6-month commitment. So, altogether, you pay $120, for the year if you add up all the months. And you get all of their pay-per-views. So I think they came up with a price of like $697 for all of the pay-per-views. Instead, you sign up for the network and you pay $9.99 a month. So that's an extraordinary deal. But what people are missing is that WWE does terrible on pay-per-view. And that all their pay-per-view buys come from their international fans, not domestically. So this makes sense. Whereas the UFC, they got $1 million on pay-per-view. Why would they move their pay-per-view business onto this Fight Pass when people are willing to pay $60 for a pay-per-view event? It makes no sense. So for people kind of bashing the two, I think it's kind of ridiculous. I will say this. Even though the network hasn't come out yet, the WWE Network comes out late February. The interface looks way better than UFC's. It has way more content and it's way more streamlined. But in terms of this whole pay-per-view thing, it's kind of ridiculous at this point.
Oh wow, that's unbelievable! I mean, I had no idea about that. About I guess WWE is doing, and I mean for the WWE, I mean this is another pretty good, PR move on their end to be comparing themselves to this. So it's pretty interesting how they're taking it, and it makes sense for them to do something like that. For the UFC, it makes absolutely no sense for how much money they'd be losing here domestically. It'd be unbelievable how much they would tank if they were to pull something like that.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. So I'm sure the UFC Fight Pass will be more streamlined. I think even the name Fight Pass sounds ridiculous to me. But I think at the same time, I don't think they're really taking the Fight Pass as seriously as WWE's taking their network. So I think in terms of who has more writing on their online network, it's certainly the WWE for sure.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the story that just broke within the last hour here, and that's with the UFC welterweight Matt Brown. We all know he's supposed to fight Carlos Condit. That fight fell through. Looks like Matt Brown's making some news elsewhere. He had a podcast of his own, and he made some comments about female MMA that really made some people mad. Here's his comments. You can judge for yourself. This is from his podcast, and I quote, "As I always said, I don't know why they put women in the UFC. Now I know why, noting that the women UFC viewers seem to flock to television when women fought, as if the Kardashians have filled the screen. I think like this, if I'm going to see $60 for a pay-per-view to watch women fight, at least they should be topless." Now, this was according to a podcast on SoundCloud. I'm not really sure if this was, his podcast. I guess it was. According to the UFC, this is his own podcast. It was weird because I never heard of an MMA fighter having his own podcast before. So that's a first in itself. But the UFC put out a statement basically, making Matt Brown apologizing for his comments and that his comments are not reflective of the UFC's mindset. I want to ask you, Jorge, a sport that gets judged and gets made fun of and that's misunderstood, why would Matt Brown even have this mentality, knowing that there's people that he, encounters on probably a daily basis that disrespects what he does for a living? Why does he have to go out and disrespect, women that are really putting it all on the line in the octagon? I mean, even if he's sexist, these women are spilling their blood. They train just as hard as the men do. I mean, this guy just seems like a sexist pig at this point. Just to be stereotypical.
Yeah, as far as his mentality, the guy can believe in whatever he wants. As far as voicing it,
Fair enough.
There's a time and place where he should do it and where he shouldn't do it. It's just unbelievable to me that these guys know that they're on the airwaves, but still just go off and just spew all this crap out of their mouth, thinking that there won't be any repercussions. When one, you still work for the organization, and two, these are your colleagues.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, and you're going to see these women at the weigh-ins. You're going to see them at the media events. It's going to make for some awkward, conversations backstage when they're trying to make weight or they're waiting for the press conference to start. Very bizarre. Let's move on and let's talk about this UFC Fight Night event. Since we won't be on to actually preview the event next week, we'll be on a day later, so we'll review all the fights on here. UFC Fight Night taking place in Georgia. Main event, Constantinos Philippou taking on Luke Rockhold. And I have to say, Jorge, I've not been the biggest fan of Yushin Okami since Yushin Okami is pretty much, faded into the sunset in terms of him being a middleweight contender. I have a new guy to pretty much state that he's super overrated, and that is Philippou. I think this is pretty much the second guy on my list as the most overrated middleweight in the history of the UFC. I'll say it right now. I think Luke Rockhold's going to kill this guy. If you take a look at Rockhold, besides losing to Vitor Belfort, he beat Tim Kennedy, he beat Jardine, he beat Souza, he beat Paul Bradley, Compared to Philippou, he lost to Francis Carmont, which is another guy I've never been a fan of. He beat Tim Bosch, which is a nice win. He beat Ricky Fortuda. Court McGee, I guess that's a decent win. Jared Herman, Jorge Rivera. All these guys. He beat Uriah Hall. We pretty much know what Uriah Hall is all about right now, pretty much not fulfilling his potential. So I guess I want to ask you, Jorge, is this kind of like a makeup fight for Luke Rockhold to pretty much get back into the kind of top 10 mix here?
Yeah, it's what they call in boxing a bounce-back fight. So, you have a guy that's easily, it's a winnable fight for Luke Rockhold. There's really no reason where he should actually lose this fight unless he gets caught again the way he did, in his last fight against Vitor. And I don't think, he's going to be threatened at all in this fight. I think Luke Rockhold wins this rather easily, either dominating fashion, unanimous decision, or he ends this fight early. I don't see him having any issues. And it is, as mentioned, a bounce-back fight for him, I think.
Sure. This card's okay. This has Yoel Romero. I know, Jorge, you've been a fan of his. He's won 2 in a row, 2 by strikes, so he should be pretty entertaining to watch. And along with him, Isaac Valley Flag's on this card. He's taking on Elias Silverio? I don't know how you pronounce it.
Silverio. Yeah, he's
Elias Silverio.
He's an undefeated Brazilian fighter, so it'll be a great fight for it's a tough fight for Isaac to fight an undefeated guy, especially coming from injury. He hasn't fought, in almost a year. It's 11 months. He did have a back injury, that did require surgery. So to see Isaac Valley Flag back, this is a guy here. He's just such an old school technical fighter. Like to me, Isaac Valley Flag is what an MMA fighter would have been, what a good MMA fighter would have been in the 80s, man. I just like to see him fight. He's very technical with, when it comes to his stance. He trains with the guys there at Jackson's MMA. He's really good friends, probably best friends with Cub Swanson. So, he's constantly being tested with his endurance. Isaac Valley Flag is coming off, he's 35 years old now, but he's developed a little rhythm, and sooner or later, because he hasn't fought since 2007, people are going to take note if he keeps winning.
Sure. Also, we have, as I mentioned before, Yoel Romero taking on Derek Brunson. Mike Eason taking on TJ Dillashaw. That should be a fun fight. Cole Miller taking on Sam Sicilia. The action gets started on UFC Fight Pass, 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Interesting enough, I'm not sure because of this Fight Pass if the Facebook fights are being eliminated. Somebody can give us a tip here if there's not going to be no more Facebook fights. Instead, the prelims are moving to the UFC Fight Pass. Please let us know. Those start off at 2 o'clock Mountain, 4 o'clock Eastern Time. So if you have a working job, sucks to be you. Otherwise, we'll have to get home and just hopefully catch it at 5 o'clock Mountain, 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
So as far as the fights, very quickly, the
Sure.
prelim card, 2 fights on the Fight Pass. There's 4 fights, which is being called the prelim card on Fox Sports 1, and then the rest of the fights on Fox Sports 1. So there's a total of about 10 fights on Fox Sports 1.
Correct. Yeah, tons of action for Fox Sports 1. UFC content's been doing really well in terms of ratings. If you follow the Twitter page of MMA Supremacy, that's pretty much the only thing that draws anything on that network. As I said before, I'm not really a big fan of their anchors exactly, as they do their Sports Center type of show, but nevertheless, the UFC content's been doing pretty well. I believe that's going to wrap up our show, man. Anything else you wanted to add before we call it quits for this week?
3 things, or a couple of things.
Sure.
Since it's the first fight where we picking winners, let's do the top 3 fights right away. All right. Obviously,
Sure.
we're both going to Rockhold. What do you got? Lorenz Larkin, again, Brad Tavares. Who are you going with?
I think I like, I don't want to sound like racist here. You know how they say about black athletes, all they say is they're athletic, but I think it's true with Larkin. I really like his athleticism. I've never been a fan of Brad Tavares, even when he was on The Ultimate Fighter, so I'm going Larkin there.
Okay.
How about you?
And I think I'm going to go to the same. Eventually, I think our picks might be the same here. So Dillashaw and Easton.
Oh, man. I like
It's a
both.
toss-up. This is a toss-up.
It is. I don't think
feel-
Mike Easton's lived up to his potential. Especially, I remember Luke Thomas hyping him up, especially him on the regional MMA scene. This guy, all they've been saying, especially within the DMV area, is, this guy's just a killer. But he's lost 2 in a row against pretty decent talent. He lost, to Brad Pickett, who I think is an awesome fighter. I've always been a fan of One Punch Pickett. So, you know what? I'm going with Mike Easton to bounce back against TJ Dillashaw, even though Dillashaw's been kind of on a tear lately. How about you?
Okay, I'm going Dillashaw. That's
Okay.
our fight where we both disagree. So we'll see how it turns out here at the end.
Sure. And I don't know if you want to make a pick with Brenneman, Brunel, another name I cannot pronounce, Brunel Daouche. I like Charlie Brenneman a lot. I think I'll go with him as well in that third from the top.
All right, since that's on there, I think that might be on the Fight Pass. So
Yeah.
I'm going Brenneman also. So we'll stick to those top 3 as our
Sure.
picks. So
Okay, cool. Right on. Anything else you want to add to?
that's it, man.
Okay.
What's your Twitter? Shout that out.
Oh, yeah. My Twitter is @JustinTime16. How about yours? We don't even shout out our own Twitter handles on here.
We
should
never
start
do
doing
that.
it.
It's at Jorge de Burque. Burque. Find me.
Okay, so that's our New Year's resolution for the new year. Every show, put out our Twitter handles. We need to do that every time we're on here. Again, you can get in touch with us. We always shout out our Twitter handle @TheLowBlow. Email us at lowblow505@gmail.com. Make sure to watch all the video interviews on youtube.com/lowblow505. Remember, Jorge's year of review of 2013, his best interviews along with some funny moments is on there now. Please check that out. Very funny stuff. And we're available on your mobile device on the Stitcher radio app, Spreaker, iTunes, and on Podomatics app also. And of course, you can get in touch with Fight Fans Radio, our show with the rest of the Fight Fans Radio family. Great content on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on Ustream, along with Spreaker as well. So for Jorge Hernandez, I'm Justin Goodrum. You were listening to episode 174 of The Low Blow. We will see you next week.
Peace.